Welcome to the Create Smarter podcast. I'm the host for this episode, Kyle McNaught, and we're going to talk about a fun little subject. We all live in Zoom. We all do our meetings and stuff like that. And Zoom is trying to become more and more of a broadcast tool. A lot of interviews online, a lot of stuff I watch on television at this point is having Zoom be its kind of go-to video conferencing website. Right. So there's a little bit of tips and tricks that we want to talk about of how to make sure when you're recording a Zoom, you're getting the best possible video for on-demand viewing later. And to do that, I had to bring in one of the greatest when it comes to all our Zoom walkthroughs, our tech checks, all the fun stuff. Connor Calority. How's it going, Connor?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I love the green and hat. It's all blending. We're looking very Irish today.
Yeah, very much. It's coming up. St. Patty's Day is never too far away.
Never too far away. So yes, like we said, we kind of this topic was spurred. We were talking a little bit earlier about like one of projects we just wrapped, and that one was all virtual. Every guest that came on, even the host, everything was done via virtual Zoom, right? They all jumped in for Zoom, and we kind of experienced, as much as everyone likes to say, oh, I know Zoom, I know what I'm doing, they ran into issues from time to time. So what I want to do with you, Connor, is just walk through sort of some of the best practices we provide and some of the ways that we help people, especially when guests come on, that while they may be well-versed in how to do Zoom in a regular video conferencing setting, what tricks and tips do we have when it comes to doing Zoom conference? So, I mean, Connor, let's start it off. What's some of the basic things you would tell people when they would join the Zoom for kind of what we call a tech check, or kind of coming on to make sure, hey, everything looks good for our video recording?
Yeah, of course. I think we like to kind of break it up into 3 sections. If you think about it, it's very simple, and Zoom's good at making that simple. You have your video, your audio, and kind of everything else. As the basic bones as it can get, starting with the camera, I think most people come in nowadays on either an integrated webcam on a laptop, or they might have a monitor for whatever computer with a webcam. Mm-hmm. And, it's amazing in the last 3-5 years, webcams, both integrated and external, become amazing. They're close to what we're filming on now. I mean, it's just impressive. So that helps a lot. But when someone joins on, you can kind of immediately be like, okay, all right, I know a couple things. So a big thing we look, for at first with camera is lighting. It's as easy as that. People nowadays, a lot of them work from home, and if not, they're in an office. So you kind of have to deal with what they give you. Nobody, unless they're an influencer, unless they're used to doing a lot of meetings. And I say that, and that's not even true anymore, because a lot of, C-level, C-suite executives have ring cams. They have people who have set them up, so, which is very helpful. But back to my point is you kind of deal with what you're given. So you kind of have to make a quick judgment call, in the tech check of, okay, are they in their living room? There's probably going to be a overhead light somewhere, or can lights in the ceiling, or they're near a window. Right. And that's not bad. I mean, those are all things to work with. So you kind of talk to them and say, hey, tell me about your surroundings. What are you looking at? What's your room look like? Oh, I got a big window over here. I have a, dome light above me, XYZ. And you kind of go from there. You basically just want to think about what's going to look best on Zoom, because even that can mess things up. What's going to look on a camera? Mm-hmm. I mean, a webcam, sorry. And you're really just looking for, a flat, no crazy shadows, good lighting presentation.
Yeah, I think, just to kind of stick to your point of lighting, right? It really is, a lot of times you're used to overhead lighting. That's fine with just a meeting.
Yeah.
When you're doing kind of broadcast, or you're trying to do something for video recording, a good light source that's aimed directly at you is great.
Yes.
A lot of times you can just use a window with the sun.
Yeah.
That's a normal thing that we try to say of like, hey, if you got a window in front of you, sit there. Now, windows are tricky. Clouds come. There's all this crazy stuff. So that's why a ring light kind of right behind your camera, if this is the camera, putting it right here so the light's shining on you, fantastic. Same with the backdrop. That's something I think we see a lot of times.
Totally.
A lot of people kind of don't recognize whatever, I don't care, whatever the background. And this is if you're using the natural background, you're not using the blur effect or any
the virtual backgrounds are very helpful if that's what you want to go for.
Right.
But sometimes it's a little almost... it looks a bit gamey. You're kind of like,
right.
Okay.
And that's where lighting really comes into play. You've got to light yourself well if you want to use virtual background, because that's kind of what they're looking at. You need to stand out. You need to be a subject that's standing out in a virtual background, so they're cropping you correctly, and they're not like taking you and also like a coat hanger next to you.
Couch behind, right.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are why lighting's so important. But again, don't break the bank. If you got the overhead, it usually works on a conference.
Yeah.
The difference when you're doing kind of broadcast is you want a little bit of a light source that's not unflattering,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Overhead has some shadows. It looks
Neck,
bad.
nose,
How are we recording
eyes.
here, right? We got two
Yeah.
light sources up there that are pointing to us.
And I'm
so
wearing a
that's-
hat, so this is the worst example.
We're doing not great.
I'm not. See, that's a good point. We'd say, hey, take the hat off. Make sure the glass has no reflection.
Yeah,
Little things
we
like
did
that.
everything bad on this.
Yeah. Oh God.
But I mean, also the other thing with the camera, like you say, a lot of the webcams are great. Mac cameras, I tend to find, are just incredible. But it
Yeah.
makes sense. You think about an iPhone;
Oh,
they've really
forget about
focused
it.
on how do they get depth of field and stuff on
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So those cameras kind of also work a little bit better.
Yeah.
Webcams are awesome. There's one cool thing we've seen recently with DSLRs, kind of the regular webcam. There's a little kind of USB HDMI thing you can plug in that will recognize a little kind of point and shoot webcam. So you
Yeah.
can get a camera that has a better lens, a better focal point, or just a better overall image quality.
Yeah.
You can get that into Zoom now, which
Yeah,
is a
use
cool
that
thing.
as your primary
Right.
webcam.
So if you're stepping it up, if you're like, I got a webcam, but I'm starting to do more recordings, I'm starting to do a podcast, I want to have that type of stuff, you might want to invest in like maybe $100 to just improve your webcam. Honestly, if you're spending any money and spend it on the lighting,
Yeah,
honestly,
right.
get little lights in the backdrop too, just to
Yeah.
kind of help you pull away from your background. You don't want a blank screen. Not blank. You don't want to be uniformed with everything in the backdrop.
Yeah.
You want to stand out as the subject from time to time. So that's why lighting does help for that
Right.
stuff.
And, to stay in the background for a second, it's, sometimes it's hard because people's offices are, they work there every day. It might not be the cleanest environment, whatever. But just that little 5 minutes, 2 minutes of saying, hey, do you mind just clearing off that desk behind you? I really like, I see this thing kind of off screen. Do you mind bringing that in? Especially if you're, let's talk about a podcast versus a call or something. If it has to do with the subject matter, if you're a, I don't know, football player and you have a helmet, let's put the helmet behind you. If you're an award winner, let's put that award over your shoulder. Just to add that little more production value like it was planned.
You're setting the stage, right? You're
Exactly.
saying, I'm this. You don't need a lower third that says a million things.
Yeah, right.
You could have a football. You can have little props that kind of
Yeah,
help say
yeah.
that stuff. Lighting wise, I know a lot of times you don't think about it. A window behind you truly is a nightmare.
Yes.
The cameras are not great enough. Your lighting situation, regardless of if you did everything we said, still not going to be good enough.
Yeah.
And it's Zoom at the end of the day. So you might have the greatest look out of your office. It shows the skyline
The
of
Grand
Chicago.
Canyon behind you,
It's not going to work. A lot of times it's going to be overexposed. That's where you need to bring in professionals if you want to capture that kind of scene and stuff like
Right.
that. I mean, I was at a shoot yesterday. We had like 2 lights that were big studio lights. Usually in our interviews, they're far away. Because we were shooting with a window behind our subject, we had the lights literally where your mic is from that subject and from where this was.
Holy moly,
and that
man.
was the only way to fight the sun outside because of the overexposed, or just everything looks blown out because it's all white.
Yeah, and then the subject themselves becomes basically pitch black
Right.
to the webcam.
Because the webcam doesn't know how to differentiate
Yeah,
that. So
yeah, yeah.
honestly, if you're going to have a window behind you, if there's nothing you can do, blackout blinds as
Yep.
much as you can block that window better, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still going to be an issue. So really, it's better if you turn your camera around and have it so the window is between you and your webcam.
Yeah, so it
That will look a lot
becomes
better.
the light,
Yeah.
like that's and that too is you talk about weather does change, but if you get that perfect, London weather where it's cloudy and overcast, that soft light, we love that. So
Yes. So if you're calling it from London,
yeah,
you're good.
You're good.
The other thing I want to talk about is the audio. I think audio has become cheaper and easier and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What are some kind of hiccups? What are some tips and tricks you have just for like getting good kind of quality audio into a Zoom call?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not an audio expert by any stance, but as a basic person looking to get into this, I mean, a simple Amazon search, there's lists out there. But I think, like I said, a couple years ago, if you said, "Oh, I'm going to use a USB microphone," I think audio engineers would laugh at you. But nowadays, it's actually pretty good. I mean, you can get a pretty cheap, just perfectly plugged into your computer, kind of, looking like this microphone that'll give you pretty good, audio quality. That being said, a lot of the guests that we've seen, at least in this last project, don't have that available to them, and they still sounded pretty good. Around that fact. And we've done crazy things. If we notice the audio is bad right away and there's nothing really you could do, there's tricks around that. You can use your iPhone, voice memo, send it to someone later, if you really want to get into it. But for a basic setup, I think there's not much you actually have to do in terms of purchasing and setting up and all this stuff. It's pretty plug and play.
I also think read the instructions with the microphones if you purchase it. There's different types of microphones. They all look the same. You don't need to match whatever your favorite podcast is.
Yeah, right.
A P filter are those rings that go around that Ariana Grande singing into.
Yeah.
That's because she's like spitting. She's screaming
Right.
as loud as she
A lot
can
of
into a mic.
plosives.
You're doing a Zoom call. You don't need to have to worry about covering that. Honestly, look at your mic, do a little bit of research. There's audio patterns that they do. So sometimes you want to talk directly like we are into the microphone. There's other times where you want to talk to the side of the microphone.
Yeah, might stand up.
It all changes. So that's just something to kind of read and understand what the microphone wants you to do.
Yeah.
Also, make sure you're connected to the correct microphone.
Oh yeah,
There's
I mean,
fun
I'm
times
taking
we've had.
calls in this room with a little, studio mic, and halfway through you might be like, "Why does that sound like they're underwater?" Oh, they're using their computer microphone instead of the nice microphone they bought.
Right.
And that kind of goes back to Zoom is getting more away. It's more helpful to people behind Zoom, and they make it pretty easy. Go to settings. They have a big thing that says camera, microphone, like in, out, so speakers and all that. And so it's very helpful. But it takes the time to read it a little through your instructions, set it up correctly, you'll be golden.
And it's hard too when you're doing it yourself because Zoom wants to do what they call as a mix minus. They don't want you to hear yourself. So it's really hard to tell sometimes. So that's where just go to the settings and quickly check. Yeah. Another thing to do, these mics, the USB ones, they also have mute buttons on it. I've seen that happen.
Oh, yeah.
One trick you can do is just tap the top of the microphone. That way you should be able to say like, hey, are you hearing, talk to your guest, whoever's recording, be like, here, I'm tapping on the microphone. That way you can hear, if you can hear this microphone. You're going to hear it if you're on the other end. You'll hear when someone hits a microphone. You're like, yeah, okay, yep, that's the microphone the audio is coming out of. So that's one way. If no one knows what microphone it is, try that.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to talk about is audio kind of playback. So Zoom does a great job of taking away your audio so you don't hear it. However, I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen it too, where someone might have external speakers or something that's turned up pretty loud. And that kind of becomes an issue, especially when it comes to recording, because then all of a sudden on the other person's microphone or your microphone that is being recorded, they're hearing that audio playback.
Yep.
So that's where kind of good headset or something that you can kind of hear does help. At the same time, try to not have it so loud. I know it's always hard.
Yeah, I mean, find a quiet environment. If you can, close the door. I mean, I know life gets in the way, but if you have the time to set up for a call, it'll help you in the end.
Absolutely. Now, kind of start to wrap up a little bit. Let's talk about kind of the internet and like what's the back end? Kind of what are your tips or what do you tell guests when they join on to our programming of what they should do?
I mean, I'll go to the expert, Michelle herself on our Team 5 tool. She always remembers,
Shout out, Michelle.
She knows what's up. Again, your machine, most of it's a laptop, most of it's, not a crazy powerful machine like we might have. So it's not going to, things are drawing different power and different energy from different sources. That makes sense to somebody. But a big thing that she says, what I'm trying to say is close all your tabs, make sure that you're dedicated the next hour just to Zoom. And that's going to help you in the long run because if you have your email open, you could get a notification ding. If you have your phone on, make sure to silence that. Little stuff like that. But yeah, I think just make sure that Zoom is really the only thing open. It's the only thing drawing power because that, especially if other microphones and cameras plugged in, your computer's going to be sweating,
Right.
But what else comes to mind when you say that?
Internet speeds do matter. I think you can look it up. If you go to Zoom's website, they'll tell you kind of what the recommended megabits per second are.
Right.
So that's something where you can go to a speedtest.com. You can see, so it's like speedtest.me is one I use, or speedof.me is one I use. I know you just type in speedtest on Google at this point. They give you speed test.
There's right in the Google browser. Yeah.
There's ways to kind of see what your internet speed is at. That helps you know, like, hey, I've got good internet speed. I should be sending it fine. Zoom has a really cool thing too. If you go into their settings, like we talked about, there's I think it's not settings, but it's like statistics. And if you go there, you'll be able to click video and it will show you what you're sending your video out. We could try to create like a little walkthrough just so people could see that. But you can see, hey, I'm sending out at 720p, which is well enough HD for online.
For a Zoom call,
for a Zoom call, that's fantastic. But it all is bandwidth adjacent, right? It all kind of works off the bandwidth. So with Zoom, your video is being uploaded. So you need a decent upload speed. What you're seeing is being downloaded to your computer. So that's something that you could care about. You could care less about. It's kind of depends on what you want. But really, a good quality upload speed matters. You don't want to share it with other programs. So that's where turning off the tabs, killing your email, killing Slack, because that's kind of constantly pulling down. That's what it's doing.
It's always searching for information.
Streaming, like streaming's the same thing. Like streaming, if someone's streaming while you're also doing a Zoom call, it's gonna be the worst thing in the world. So tell your kid to get off Twitch. There's no need to be creating the Zoom right now. Like you don't need Instagram Live. That will really hurt your Zoom. But yeah, that's kind of where the internet speeds play with it. So best case scenario, close out of everything, kill your Spotify, kill your email,
Yeah,
kill
yeah.
Slack, anything that possibly is going to take up internet bandwidth.
Or
If
make a
you're-
sound in the background, right?
if you're in a shared home. Luckily, Zoom doesn't require a ton of internet speed,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's one of those things of like, if you are having issues, it's sort of the, hey, everyone, can we just kill, like, don't be on Zoom, don't be on the computer
just for
right
the next
now.
half an hour,
Give
let
me a
me
half
be on
hour
this
to
call,
do this,
yeah.
right?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the best way to do it is just get hardwired if possible. They
Hardwired
make
is- yeah.
adapters. They make computers now just have right in the side. So if possible, hardwire up.
Hardwired is great. Yeah, absolutely. And that way you're not worried about like Wi-Fi went
Yeah.
down or anything like that. If
But that's
your
again,
internet
that's
went down
only
the
if you
house,
can. I understand not everybody has that ability. So
Yeah. Finally, let's talk a little bit of kind of back end tricks with Zoom. I know there's a couple things that like some tricks you picked up that you talked about. There's some stuff I talked about with that. I mean, I can start with just
Yeah,
sort
please.
of back end of things you can do. Zoom's great because they, like I said at the very beginning of this, they want to be in more of the broadcast field.
Yep.
So for instance, we use a switcher called vMix, which is a great little kind of I forgot what it's considered, but it's a video switcher, so it can bring in a bunch of stuff.
Yep.
They've integrated with Zoom because Zoom wants to be a part of like a television broadcast. In the back end, there's a couple things you have to do. So if you go into the settings of Zoom, and if you go up to the tabs, there's tabs around there. One of them is video. If you click video, it'll come up with a bunch of boxes that you can check of what you want. One big thing that's really nice, it says optimize video for third-party editing.
Right.
What that means is it helps to be able for a web editor or an editor of a video to be able to have something that's a little more static and that they like to work with. Zoom's pretty smart. Most video conferences are. They adapt their kind of frame rate because sometimes when you're sharing a screen, you don't need a 60 frames per second. You need what the NFL is using
Of
for their
course
like
not, right.
television because
Yeah.
you don't need that much motion. It helps them with it helps Zoom with their bandwidth and stuff like that. When you do the optimize, it tries to keep it a little bit more static for everything. So it helps with video editors because that way it's not crazy in what we do. Typically when we edit, we're trying to edit in one frame rate because we want to export it like that. And this is just this is us kind of complaining
yeah,
about
now
some
we're
stuff.
nerding.
But click optimize for third-party video editors. It will make life easier, especially if you're recording the Zoom call yourself. There's also the option to record ISO audio,
That's what I was
which is
gonna say, yep.
huge.
Huge.
ISO audio is a big thing. And it also record the gallery or the speaker view because
Yeah.
those help with all that type of stuff.
Yeah, it's just more the merrier when you're at least on the editing side, I guess is where we're staying. But it's like just more things you can help out and say, shoot, if the bandwidth is too much and that one camera glitched, do I have a backup? Do I have something else to say? Oh, that little audio glitch. Let me go to their ISO and just pull that bit out. It's super helpful.
Right. Someone didn't know to unmute their mic. Then that editor doesn't have to deal with just one audio channel where this person's coughing, going to the bathroom, doing whatever they want because they weren't muting their mic for you if that was what the producer or the
Yeah.
video recorder wanted you to do. Also, make sure that HD video is enabled. That's one of
Yeah,
the things that
please,
like a
right.
lot of people don't recognize. They're like, I got the brand new webcam. I got
Yeah.
all this stuff. It's not as out of the box as you'd want it. However, once you save these settings, it does stay out of the box for the most part.
true.
It will kind of keep all these settings saved. However, it is something where your internet bandwidth will kind of play a little havoc with
Yeah,
this stuff.
yeah.
What about you? Anything that like tricks or things you've told anyone about?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I would say a majority of the stuff that I have learned and been told is just take some time to dig through Zoom. Both the, I don't know, you call it the actual portal on your computer itself when you open Zoom, the app, but go on zoom.com on your account. And like Kyle's saying, all of those tabs at the top are all just there to help you. There might be stuff that you wouldn't think about or maybe like secret little, boxes you have to click. But it's very helpful just to read through stuff, read the instructions of your webcam, mic, make sure it all talks to each other the same way, and you'll be all set up.
Yeah, at the end of the day, Zoom is video conferencing.
Yeah.
So their settings are made to be optimized for video conferencing. They also want to be helpful when it comes to broadcasting.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Go in the back end, read a couple of
Yeah,
stuff.
just
It's not
take
too
your time.
confusing.
Yeah.
You don't need to be video editors or producers to understand what they're asking. A lot of times it's like, do you want to make your video prettier?
You're like,
Yeah. Okay,
yes.
click that one.
Yeah.
I'll do that one.
Yeah, and I love when they say recommended. So it's just like, even, if you know nothing at all, what Zoom is probably telling you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Last thing, when you share the link, make sure that the download is available. If you're sharing this link to someone, that
Yeah,
is something we run into a lot of times where like they get the on-demand recording, but they didn't enable a download. So
Yeah.
if you're sending me a video on Zoom, please just make sure that that's there. Otherwise, I have to do like a screen record, so I have to re-record the thing in real time, and it's a fun nightmare for me once in a while. So just make sure when you send something, just open an incognito tab so you can see what you're sending to someone. You can understand, oh, okay, if I send this,
Right.
this ain't going to actually work for the people I want to send it to.
Exactly. And that goes back to prep, I mean, whatever, if you're either a podcast or a call or a, recording, meeting at all, just do a little prep, think ahead and plan, and it'll save you in the end.
Also, I mean, the last piece of advice I'll walk away with is like, just be accommodating to
Right.
if you're going to join a show or something like that. Understand the producers are walking through what they can walk through. Everyone's done Zoom a million times. We all know that. But at the same point, you don't want to finish a recording and then you see the thing. You're like, oh my God, you couldn't see me. You couldn't hear me. What happened?
Exactly.
It's give the producer a time, or if someone's trying to record with you, just take a little bit of time. Schedule 15 minutes before so you can come on, make sure everything looks
Exactly.
good.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes to prep. And you might be an expert in your field. Let the expert in their field, all the questions they're doing is just to help you. They're trying to make your production look as good as it can.
Trust me, we've recorded with NASA scientists who have also had issues.
Exactly.
So everyone has issues with Zoom. Otherwise, if you got questions, feel free to email me or Connor. I'm Kyle at the number 5toolproductions.com. That's 5toolproductions.com. Connor is Connor with
go.
an OR.
OR, yeah, two N's, OR.
2 N's OR at 5toolproductions.com. Other than that, it's been great talking to you, buddy.
Hey, man, always a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Create Smarter Podcast.
Yes, sir. And we'll see you next time.
See ya.